introduction of the guest of honor, John Anderson Fraser, who is internationally recognized Canadian journalist, novelist, drama and dance critic, magazine editor, fourth master of Massey College, recipient in 2002 of the Order of Canada. John has also been twice honoured by the Queen with the Silver Jubilee Medal in 1977 and the Golden Jubilee Medal in 2002. John Anderson Fraser.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much. Liz and I are very honored to be here, back among fellow Scots. Actually, the biggest highlight for me is to be in the same room as the former Dean of Music at the Faculty of Music at the University of Toronto. Still going strong in his 90th year, and it's a great model for me. It means I've got at least 18 more years of dancing to do. We're here to celebrate Scotland, visit it or whatever, but I have to say, we're all going to have to put our seatbelts on for the next 4 years, because the Donald has embraced his inner Scot. You may not realize it, but he has. He did it about 2 months before he won the election south of the border. He went to Scotland to open up his latest golf course. And the entire, right the day of Brexit, or the day before Brexit, the day after Brexit, the entire leaders of the Western media were there to get his views on Brexit and the election, and he spent the entire time promoting his golf course and hotel, particularly the suites on the 9th hole. And eventually, all the announcers on the stage stopped taking fees. They said, the man's just advertising his hotel. And they all announced that there's no way he could get to be president. Donald Trump is now the president of the United States of America. And I'm going to tell a story with some advice for him and all of the Trumps in the world, which I'll get to at the end of my talk. But I wonder if any of you saw a wonderful series of television called The Crown on Netflix. I thought, actually, the most moving part was the Queen Mother getting her castle of Maine up in the northern tip of Scotland, and how much it meant to her. And it reminded me of the story when she came to Toronto to open the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother wing at Belmont House, where many of us will end up before our days are done. And the died in our house very peacefully. She just sort of slumbered away. And during the period that she was dying, my godfather, who was an Anglican bishop from Capella, Saskatchewan, was visiting Toronto. He was allowed into Toronto once a year to raise on the Richard Toronto parishes to raise money for his diocese. And so my mother, asked him to come in to say some prayers over my grandmother's bed. And they got on either side of the bed, and Bishop Coleman indicated to my mother she should kneel on the other side of the bed, and he knelt. And my grandmother, I think my mother thought she'd been out of it. She was just gently sliding out of this life. And in the middle of the prayer, my grandmother opened her eyes, looked to the right, to the left. I don't know whether she recognized Bishop Coleman or not, but she certainly recognized my mother. She said, she was in Glaswegian, my grandmother. And she said, "Catherine, is that you?" And my mother, I wasn't there, but I'm sure she was crying. She said, "Yes, Mommy, I'm here." And Bishop Michael's there. She looked at him. And mother leaned over to give her a kiss, and Bishop Coleman got up with an inspiration, knowing that she was Presbyterian. He said, "Mrs. Dickinson, would you like me to confirm you in the church? All it will take is for me to put my hands on your head." And she turned and looked at him and said, "You'll keep your hands to yourself." And that's my advice to all of the Trumps. Keep their hands to themselves, and they might make it through. And I think when you go to Scotland, the other thing is to avoid this club. And remember that the Scottish people are one of the great small nations of this world. What they mean to this country is amazing. I would say that I'm Lillian Anderson, and my lesson is Fraser. But they also are hardy. And that same grandmother that I just told you about had told her daughters and had told me that her father was the editor of the Glasgow Herald. And I'll finish on this story. So when I was doing graduate work in England, my mom came over and we drove up together to Glasgow to study roots. And we got to Glasgow, we went to the offices of the Glasgow Herald, a little fine newspaper. And I'm a journalist. It was exciting to go there. And we went in, and I found out a great truth about what happens sometimes on transatlantic voyages. We could find no record of an Anderson as an editor of the Glasgow Herald in the period of time that my great-grandfather would have been there. But when we made sufficient inquiries, we found out that there was a chief compositor. So what had happened is in the voyage across the ocean, my great-grandfather was elevated to the editor's desk. And it was something I aspired to all my life. So that's what happens sometimes on boat crossings. And I started off as a copy boy at the Toronto Telegram, and there was the head of the copy boys was a guy named McTavish, and he had been the Batman to the owner of the Telegram. And I have to tell you, it was the only cruel Scot that I've ever been. But it was good to keep it in perspective. I'm really excited about the dances tonight. We learned the first two dances we think.